Hi, I'm Tao Mo, the SVP of Marketing at Uptempo. Each month, this MOPS Unplugged series brings some of the best minds in MOPS to answer one question related to marketing planning, budgeting, and work management. A little about Uptempo. We provide marketing planning software for enterprises with large marketing teams. Uptempo helps these marketing teams plan better, spend smarter, and execute with confidence. We hope you enjoy this series.
Why isn't MOPS involved more strategically in the planning process? For me, this is partly to do with the pedigree of marketing operations as a discipline, at least as I've experienced it. If we go back 10, 12 years, that's when I was first starting out in MOPS. It was a very technically oriented discipline. We were responsible for the tech stack. There were all these new tools coming out. It was all about MarTech. And I think that orientation has persisted in many ways up to the present day. It's not universal, but when we think about what's MOPS responsible for, they think I run tools, I build tech stacks, I create pretty diagrams of my tech stack, and that's like what I am about. And the challenge is that when you are really focused on tools, those are all kind of downstream of strategy, and to some extent they're enablers of business results, but you're not directly accountable for business results. So there is often this attitude, and I don't want to say that every marketing operations professional has it, but I have encountered it, where it's like, well, that's somebody else's problem. It's like, we don't really make the strategy and we're not really accountable for the results. We're just, we want an organized tech stack, we want efficiency, and those are all beautiful things and things that I, very much prize and value. But the challenge is then you're almost excluding yourself by default because you're saying, I'm on the outside of this process. So that's a big part of the problem, is that if we want to be involved strategically in the planning process, we need to get our head into that game and think about it as part of our problem that we need to solve. Like, yes, we may enable those results, we may support marketers with technology, among other things, but fundamentally we need to be looking at business KPIs, and we need to be aligning ourselves and aligning our strategies with those business KPIs and focusing our efforts and the efforts of our team on where they're going to have the most impact there. And I think that change alone will bring us into that game, bring us into the right headspace, and make us more valuable in that conversation. The other aspect of it is we're often very self-effacing. So, and there are very notable exceptions to this, obviously, in our industry, but many MOPS people are in the background. They're in the boiler room, making the machines work, making the trains run on time. They're not necessarily there challenging the CMO on aspects of strategy, or saying, look, we really need to think about this for, 2024, whatever the year is. They're not demonstrating to the marketing leader that they can be a thought partner, that they're somebody that they really want there. And I think that's often a shame, because marketing operations has a lot to offer to the marketing leader. And if they can demonstrate that, if they can continue to show up in that way, they're going to get invited into those conversations. They're going to be there as the right hand of that marketing leader. And I think the best marketing leaders know this coming in and are looking for that and want that, crave that. But not everybody does. Not everybody is used to that. So there's a process of how do you show up? How do you telegraph your wins? How do you translate what you're doing into something that the business cares about, not just, tech speak that is very unintelligible to some people. And then the last aspect to me on not being involved can often just be prioritization. So there's a frequent complaint in MOPS quarters that we're too busy. And I understand it, because I'm too busy. I have too much to do. And it's very stressful, especially if you're conscientious and you want to feel like everything's under control, that everything's taken care of. But the challenge is, if you're lost in details and a million little things, and the message you're giving up to your leadership is, we're just too busy, we're just too busy, what incentive do they have at that point to say, well, I'm going to add more to your plate and bring you into this whole planning process? They may feel that they are doing you a favor by saying, you know what, we're going to leave so-and-so out of this, and we'll just come to them with the plan, and they can then help prepare how they're going to support it. But we're not going to add more work because they're so busy. And so it's hard, but I think if we view being a strategic, revenue-oriented leader, a part of the GTM leadership team, which I think is where marketing operations should be, then we need to make time for that, and that's a discussion that we need to have. And I think one of the things that MOPS can do is to be be that thought partner, be a challenger. And by that, I mean, you don't have to be a subject matter expert on every tactic in the marketing world. But as a marketing ops person, you have a general familiarity with all of them. And I think if you're doing your job right, you're also keeping your eye out for what's working in the market. That's just one of the things that I do fairly instinctively. I want to know what's working. What are the latest, greatest, most innovative companies doing in their go to market? What are the most interesting, marketing strategies? What's evolving? Because the last thing you want is to become an expert like in horseshoes, as cars are coming out. Like you don't want to be tied to a specific technology when that actually isn't the strategy that the team wants to pursue. So I think understanding the need that you're trying to fill, and then you can bring that in. And it doesn't mean like you may not be an expert on content marketing, but you can benchmark the market kind of in the way that a management consultant would and say, this is the latest and greatest. This is what forward thinking companies are doing. So that's, very important. Another thing that you can do in terms of adding value to those discussions is bringing that analytical and data oriented lens. So you may be working with marketers that are very creative. And you need that. You need that dynamic, creative energy that's not inhibited. But you can meet that with data a lot of the time, and then really help to say, well, here's we tried that idea. Here's how it turned out, or I'm seeing some interesting things here in the data, and maybe that suggests we should focus more here. So bringing that, being kind of a little bit of a conductor, a little bit of a guide, whatever metaphor you want to use, but bringing those things in, not in a way that you're trying to take over, but uh, that the team, you're enabling that team to do their best work by providing data, by providing analytical and operational rigor. That's super important. And then the last way, which I think is very much within the wheelhouse of ops, is just that operational planning framework. So again, outside of tech, we have headcount, we have capabilities analysis. We have compensation and incentives. Are the marketers being rewarded in the right way? How are they feeling? Are they motivated? This kind of comes up to almost like a chief of staff type role. But I think many marketing operations professionals could take this on and do a really good job at it. Also, just are we working on the right things? Are we on track for timelines, project management? Obviously, this, something that you need to staff for if it's going to be a formal part of your role, but this is a very natural role for ops and a place where they can add a ton of value. But the other way that MOPS can add value as part of that planning process is to own the business plan aspect of the marketing plan. So what I mean is, pretty much every marketing team has some kind of funnel laid out on a spreadsheet that rolls up into the overall business plan of the company that says, the company needs to get so much new revenue or ARR this year. Therefore, we need so much opportunities. We need so much pipeline. We need so many MQLs, and, backing it down all the way there. So this is something I think that's very natural for marketing ops to own if it's not already owned by some sort of central ops planning function. And even if it is, marketing ops, I think, should be a critical stakeholder in that process, both in terms of challenging and rationalizing certain assumptions, like, is this conversion rate assumption correct? Does it actually track with what we've been seeing? If we're projecting improvements in certain ratios or in certain volumes, say, is this reasonable? Is seasonality going to affect this? All those different things, so that we come out of that planning process, with a set of targets that are achievable, that make sense, that are kind of been vetted. You're taking care of the team that way at the front end, as well as supporting them and actually reaching their targets.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it stems from, at a base level, I think it stems from the fact that we haven't earned it, which is going to sound
Hot take.
Yeah, it's a hot take. It's definitely a hot take, but and a lot of us aren't going to like it, but I like to view things from an accountability standpoint, and like, what is it that's in my control that I can do better? And just in my experience, I know early on in my career, I didn't do this, but I had that same desire to have a seat at the table. I'd always say, hey, I want a seat at the strategy table. I remember this very vividly, my second job. I always wanted to have a seat at the strategy table. And I actually ended up reporting directly to the CMO, but I didn't really take advantage of the opportunity that I had back then. talking directly to her. In order for us to be seen as a strategic person that's involved in planning, we have to show that value to the marketing leader. And now, as I run an agency, I have to, or I get fired. So they stop using me. And so it's very distinctly different than when I was when I was working in-house. But I think that the principle of us wanting to be involved in those strategy discussions is we've got to prove that value and show that value. So we need to build that relationship with our leaders and show what we bring to the table, which is the second part of the question, which what MOPS brings to the table is incredible. We see the data. We're the closest to the data. We have visibility into not only marketing's data, but oftentimes we have visibility into sales data, customer success data. We're in a really unique position to have this visibility. So it's our job to be able to take that visibility that we can see and then package it up into stories that are actionable for the marketing leader. And I don't just mean share a report. I mean, share a report and say, hey, here's what I found. We went to all of these events last year. These are the top events that I think we should continue doing. Being able to bring that data story to your marketing leader is going to get you that seat at the strategy table.
Yeah, because it seems like the planning process is done off in a corner with the execs in some fancy offsite, and it comes back and here's the word, right?
Yeah. I don't think it happens out of the gate. In fact, my experience is I have never been involved in the planning process straight out the gate. Like it's the marketing leader just doesn't come to me just naturally out of the blue on their own. It's not until I've shown value that I start getting those pulled into those questions where the marketing leader is like, oh, okay, John's providing a lot of value. I need his insights, absolutely need his insights while I'm planning. And that's actually what happened this most recent year. I mean, I delivered a lot of value for one of the marketing leaders that I work with. And so as she was planning, I worked very closely with her to get her the insights that she needed so that she could prep for the next year and determine what marketing activities they were going to do. But I worked with her very closely to at least look at the fact, like, what did they do last year? And so I worked with her very closely to give her visibility into how what they did last year performed so that she could work, which is a common method, she could work backwards into the planning for 2024 and being like, and understanding what exactly it is that she needed to hit, what the number of leads she needed, the number of events she needed to attend, the number of marketing activities she needed to do so that she could hit the targets that the company has for 2024.
Right, plan integrity. Yeah, I feel like MOPS, they hold so much insight, as you said, because all the information is tricky to pull together. And then once you have it, the interpretations, etc. It's interesting to see how people plan differently and budget differently.
Yes. Yeah. I imagine you probably see a lot of different ones. For me, this is actually one of the things I'm the most passionate about, I think, in the marketing ops world, is this communication gap where, I feel like we're as a whole starting to understand we need to be better at it. And I think that when we do bridge this gap, that we are going to realize how crucial we are to the company. But it won't just, well, I shouldn't say it won't be us that will realize how crucial we are to the company, but the company will realize how crucial we are to the company, which is what we all want. Start small. I actually did a post about this today, just in relations to attribution, but that doesn't have to be perfect. Similar with attribution, you just need to get some quick wins. Start showing your value. Start small, show your value. Start with where you are. Don't take this influencer who says, hey, you should be doing this. Realize where you are. And then once you know where you are, identify 1-2 areas where you can add value. You can package up some insights and add value for your marketing leader, and then start communicating that up. You get a win in one place, that starts building your credibility and trust as far as who you are. And as you continue, that'll give you the runway to be able to continue doing that. And your reputation will grow, the perception of who you are will grow. And like I said, again, you'll become that indispensable piece that will need to be pulled in for planning, because the team will realize they can't do anything without you. Yeah, there was one last thing I just thought of that I think is crucial to all this, and that has nothing to do with marketing and operations.
Oh.
It has everything to do with you taking the time to understand the business and what the business cares about. You need that foundational understanding if you're going to bridge the visibility and the data that you have with what matters to the business.
I think that a lot of marketing operations people come from the technical side more so. They tend to be introverted. They tend to be more technical. A lot of times MOPS people start off as a single contributor, right? Kind of a solo position, and then you grow into it. I think it's hard for MOPS people to really understand marketing at its core. A lot of us don't have a marketing background. We didn't go to school for marketing. That's not our vocation, if it were.
Lots of marketers don't either.
Facts, absolutely. So then that's another thing. It's like the things that you're asked to do, you learn by doing in a MOPS position. Nobody teaches you per se, right? So it's just like, you don't know marketing really well. You don't know data very well. You're not a freaking data scientist. Like all these, you're not a content writer. All these things that you have to learn on the fly doesn't give you a lot of time to sit there and be strategic, right? That takes time and effort to put into to think about being strategic and thinking in a strategic way. And you're not really given that. So there's a lot of hurdles to why marketing operations people don't get to be strategic. There's a lot of things to overcome in that area. What people say is like, I want to know my biggest return on investment. What you actually want to know is, what you actually should be wanting to know is, let me actually say that, what you actually should be wanting to know is, what do our customers value the most from us, right? That's the question. The question shouldn't be a business question, which is like, where do we make the most money and where do you put our spend at? It's like always a business question. That's not what you should ask. The question always has to be related to the customer. What do they want from us? What do they value the most? What's their return purchase? Like if it's a customer related question, then these data points become actually a lot easier, but it's never that. It's always a business question, which is why you end up chasing your tail over and over and over again. From an operational standpoint, I think the biggest thing from what I say for MOPS is getting out of the technical, right? It's just not a technical position. And that's where most MOPS people are comfortable. And it's hard to get them away from that because they're so comfortable there. That's the challenge I see for them. The challenge with MOPS people is challenging them to be more curious. I tell younger MOPS people this when I'm giving them their advice. It's like, they'll be like, the execs don't understand this, or marketing leaders don't understand this about my job. But what don't you understand about their job?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's parts of their job you don't get either, and that you don't understand. And you need to be curious about that too as well. You can't expect someone to understand you when you're not trying to understand them. So you need to do your due diligence about just coming from an understanding place. You're not trying to solve all their problems. You're trying to understand the point of view they're coming from, the perspective they're coming from, the challenges that they have, so that you can then explain your challenges to them. And hopefully together you can come up with a solution. But if you don't understand them, then they can't understand you either.
And I also find that like when we think about planning, oftentimes it's just not like a one-time thing for the year. Here's our plan, this is fine. Because plans don't always work out. Right. And I've seen this happen again. They're like, your plans can change 5 times in the year because maybe the economy, maybe a pandemic, maybe something else, or a new product has come to fray and they're competing with you, etc. So you have to change that plan. And part of the challenge for enterprises changing the plan is like, they're so large. So to pivot and understand where they are, especially from a budget standpoint, if you're like, wait, we have to change this. How much money do we have left? Where is it already committed? How can we
Mhm.
move it? Because we got to chase this other thing now.
Mhm.
That's like ugh, so
Yeah.
difficult to do. And that's the kind of insight and data that they need to have in order to then make the decision. All right, can't do in-person events. What's up?
Right.
What's on tap?
Right. 100. Plans change all the time. I feel like sometimes these plans are just a joke. They're just, it's just a knock joke, and we'll just change it later. I think the other thing is going back to our earlier conversation about goals. When the goals are something related to money, then the plans are always going to change because money's always going to be fluctuating back and forth and up and down. So
Yeah.
if you, again, you have a $50 million revenue goal, yeah, that plan is going to change all of the time, right? It's hard to stay steady when it's just like some arbitrary number. Not, I mean, it's a real number you're trying to get to, but there's no there. I don't have anything steady there. There's a million ways that I can try to
Yeah.
get revenue. So yeah, that's going to change all the time. Versus like trying to anchor that revenue number in something that is more tangible. I'm trying to release a new product. I'm trying to get into a new market. We're trying to improve customer satisfaction by X or whatever. That's a more, steady thing that I can, settle my revenue goal into, which is then harder to move, right? So it's like one of those things, like how do you anchor your revenue goal into something more tangible?
Yeah, I've seen there being so many different dimensions impacting why marketing operations is not at the table for planning. And I think it goes down to a few core roots, and that is, as the poll that Daryl did a couple of weeks back talked about, marketing operations has a habit of saying yes to everything and having poor prioritization and poor communication. So in the exercise of planning, we are overlooked because there isn't the notion that there's a high degree of consultation that anyone would benefit from. It's just considered that marketing operations is a service desk.
Mhm.
And I think to break organizations of that habit, the elements of budget planning and marketing operations coverage in campaign planning, I think, are the two pathways that would help us get to the table. And what I mean by that is, as campaigns become more complex, as machine learning comes to bear on what marketing is doing, I think the degree to which technologists need to be in the conversation about campaign engineering, we will we'll be given the opportunity to say at the table that this is the sort of area where we need to be in the planning process. So it isn't something that you can sort of flip a switch on. It's something that I think we need to push as an industry. And I think by highlighting the complexity and the dependency on data and technology, we can say that your fancy new integrated campaign plans that you want to execute on are heavily reliant. And so we need to be at the table as a stakeholder in the execution and success of your deep data rich marketing technology dependent fancy integrated campaign. We need to be at the table for planning. And if marketing operations was able to start saying no, even occasionally, but
Mhm.
starting to say no, where no, we do not have that as a priority in our backlog to be able to execute this year. I
Mhm.
think some of those sayings of no would start forcing us into the planning cycle, because marketers and sales organizations, I think, would start to understand they don't get what they need if
Mhm.
we start saying no. So, but I'd love your insight, because you see the same thing. No is not generally an option that marketing operations teams get to use.
No, I hate hearing the word no, and I try to quash that whenever I can. But I do want to empower people to be smart about it. So if they are part of the planning process and they see these are the business goals, these are the marketing goals, and these are the programs that we think that will get there from a marketing operations lens, they can say, these programs are not even, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. For the
Right.
dollars that we put into this program, you had this. It would be better spent over here. Or how we're doing it is not efficient today with freelancers. We may want to bring this part in-house.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
if you want to launch that, that's going to have to be the back end of the year because we have to have all this set up. So your planning for that has to be shunted to the back end of the year. I think whenever I go to a marketing ops person with a problem or a project and they either push back, force me to think about different questions and offer up different solutions to solving the problem, then I see them as a partner. I see them as, oh, they're
Mhm.
going to help me solve this problem. They have better insight into the data, into the technology. So I need their perspective in this instead of just coming up with so many grand creative ideas on my own. I need it rooted in data, rooted in investment, rooted in technology. And if I see that they're a problem solver, they're a partner, instead of like an IT help desk, somebody that says no, then I'm more willing to say, yeah, it totally makes sense to bring this person into the planning process.
I think at the root of a lot of these challenges. One of the analogies that I was thinking of ahead of this chat today was um, I, I, I think a number of us in marketing operations defer to food analogies and talking
Yeah.
about, what that looks like. And I think one of the analogies that comes to mind is oftentimes marketers arrive at the restaurant and expect to be able to pick anything off the menu that they've heard about, not necessarily off the menu that the restaurant is specifically designed to do. So you get marketers arriving at a raw food sushi restaurant, and they show up with their family in tow, and they say, we are so excited, and little Johnny needs a hamburger and fries, and I would like a pulled pork sandwich for dinner, and you have to do it. And so marketing operations teams would, if yes is always the default, go off, buy a smoker, go off and buy the things needed, and 27 hours later, show up with what they need to deliver, and the family is angry and irritated. And they've been sitting around for 27 hours, and
Angry.
why did it take so long? Instead of saying no and forcing the marketer to go back to the planning table and saying, okay, well, next year we want to be able to have pulled pork sandwiches and burgers and fries for the kids. What do we need to do, marketing operations, restaurant running team, to ensure that that's something that we're capable of doing next year? So absolutely put us in the planning process. But I think from a marketing operations lens, what can we do? We can highlight where requests fall outside of planning, call out the exceptions, accept the ones that might actually drive revenue, but then push back on the ones that don't.
I feel like I'm heavily involved strategically in the planning process in my role, which I love. But I feel that sometimes MOPS isn't super involved in that process because sometimes the role is viewed as just the technical or the implementation side of marketing rather than like the strategic powerhouse it can really be. So remember that like as a marketing operations professional, we see all the moving pieces happening, and a lot of times we're able to see how it all comes together too. So remember that you have the ability to provide a holistic perspective on what's working and what's not. And so ways that marketing ops can provide value, first things first, enable your team with data, set up as much reporting infrastructure as you can for each stakeholder on your team, make the data as readily available as possible. So why I understand that, it's not possible sometimes to have a dashboard that summarizes everything perfectly. I like to have monthly check-in meetings with those stakeholders to walk them through the performance. So when you have those check-ins, make sure that you're focusing on giving context. Don't just show what happened, but also try to give perspective on why you think it happened. So main point here is like, just don't focus on end of quarter or annual, like end of year reporting. Streamline the flow of information as much as possible to everyone on the team, including leadership, so that they can keep a pulse on how things are performing in real time rather than after the fact. And this helps you add value to the planning process, even if you're not present for every meeting. So secondly, like, I think this is a big one. Don't be afraid to use your voice. When you notice a pattern in data, whether it's positive or negative, share those findings with the team so that one, you could help spark an idea on how to continue building on something that's working really well, Or you can also help raise a concern that you and your team can address to make modifications on a program that's running. So doing that helps the team lean on you for guidance to make sure that the campaigns they are running are data driven and working and functioning well. Another way is to identify gaps and express them to your leadership throughout the year, not just at the end of the year. So this could be process gaps, technology gaps, data gaps, reporting gaps, anything that slows your team down from achieving peak efficiency. Doing this keeps an open line of communication between MOPS and leadership, and it gives your leadership necessary context when planning time comes around. It can help them plan for things of the department and the needs for the department because you've had that information, you've been giving them that context throughout the year, and they were able to see their own like patterns and trends themselves too. So you're kind of enabling them with necessary context all year round. And then finally, another way like MOPS can provide value, and this is probably the most important way in my opinion, is going to be revenue driven more than campaign driven. Ultimately, campaigns can drive a lot of meetings and opportunities, but never turn into revenue sometimes. So it's always monitoring how performance is measuring against the goal of a campaign. So if a goal was awareness and we did that, great. But if a campaign's goal is to create pipeline and we've done that, but none of the pipeline ever turns into close won revenue, it's marketing operations' job to raise those concerns and make recommendations for changes that should be made. Because to me, this is like one of the best ways to add value, because you're showing that you are looking at the bigger picture, and that develops trust with your team to bring you into the planning process sooner rather than later, because they know you're going to help the department achieve their goals.
I know, and it's a really good question, because we in MOPS constantly ask ourselves that question as well. Like, we want to be in the planning process. Most of us aren't at our core like technology geeks that are just like in systems all the time. That's all we want to do. I think if we wanted to do that, we would have joined an IT organization and like been happily in our Jira systems doing our dev cycles and our agile projects. But that's not who we are at the core. We're technology experts, yes. But we also have a good degree of business acumen. Most of us do. And so we kind of have to ask ourselves why we don't occupy those seats. And it really kind of comes down to, I believe, like having that seat at the table of the leadership decision-making process. And I think it's something we really struggle with. I think some folks do it better than others. But I think there is, to some degree, a little bit of a branding issue with marketing ops, that we're too technical. And it's a function of our role, where we derive our value. And you think about organizations doing more with less. And usually the less is less people. Like, let's be honest, our organizations are cutting back on headcount. But we recognize that we need to have the systems in place. So if you think about our bandwidth, you've got a technology stack that has 6 critical tools on it that are doing orchestration, your marketing automation. You've got to work with your sales operations team to make sure that everything is like synced with Salesforce. You may have some lean data experts, et cetera, et cetera. And you're running that with a very lean team. There's not a whole lot of bandwidth to be strategic in that type of environment. You're like essentially keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the little time that we have to do analytics, because really it comes down to, are we able to present a story based upon data? That's that's one of the values that we have. Can we present a story based upon data that aligns with the finance organization, aligns with executive leadership, that gives them confidence that they can say, hey, marketing ops is delivering strategic value. They're not just the Marketo geeks or the HubSpot geeks or the, insert, technology, CDP, whatever technology it is. They're delivering strategic value and they should have a seat at the table. Generally, when we're involved, and I'll put that in air quotes, when we're involved, we're more so delivering decks, delivering slides, delivering PowerPoints to the decision makers and hoping that message gets translated. And I think in a lot of cases, because of our bandwidth, because of like what we operate in, that we operate in a lot of detail, some of that information probably is a little bit too detailed. And then it gets filtered, and the message may get diluted, and in whatever ways our intended message may not get up to the seat at the table, because I think some of this is our fault. It's our fault and it's not our fault. Is that, you mentioned that a lot of our slide decks tend to end up in the appendix slide, because we're not necessarily, we're focused on these very detailed metrics that we know about. And like in a lot of cases, like, if you talk to like Jessica Cow and some other folks that have put together some presentations along this front, it's kind of known as Geek Speak. And it's really detailed, and you can put that Philadelphia story meme up, and we all know what that looks like. But we have to learn to elevate our conversations to be able to speak to the C-suite and understand that they do speak a different language than we do, and that we have to be somewhat bilingual. And that takes time, that takes professional development. But I do believe we can get there, and most of us want to get there. It's just a matter of building that muscle. Like, let's talk about the value that we do add, because it's not just a situation where MOPS just says, hey, I want a seat at the table because I want to be important. We actually bring a lot to that table, and we need to develop that muscle so that we can deliver that value. So, I mean, a couple of things that we do deliver is, we do own our technology stacks. We are the technology experts in our organizations. And as, marketing has become more and more digital, as the customer experience has become more and more digital, that technological know-how has to be more and more ingrained in our strategy. So who's better positioned to deliver like insights into how we need to digitally enable our marketing technology, our customer experience, our internal customer experience, our revenue experience in marketing ops? So, and in the absence of having marketing ops at the table, you have folks that may have an incomplete picture of what that value is. And so we're also the process experts. You think about doing more with less. Ultimately, how do you do more with less? Is you look at inefficiencies in your process and eliminate unnecessary work, unnecessary process, unnecessary manual steps. And I think this is where a lot of value that some of the AI solutions are playing. There's incredible value that's able to provide without detracting from the human component of the experience, that marketing ops needs to step up to the table and deliver on those strategies. I think in the absence of that, we continue to have inefficient processes that add cost to our organization that don't necessarily add value. So it allows our companies to be more profitable too. And then, of course, because we are looking at the data, and we probably understand the data better than anybody else, because we're in the systems, we're running the campaigns, we're looking at the kind of the core leading and trailing metrics. We're able to talk to talk to the metrics that matter. And that's where getting our C-suite language like improved helps, because if we're able to tell the news in an objective way, then it's going to impact, the marketing strategy. It's going to make sure that everybody's aligned to the OKRs of the organization, aligned to the company strategy. And there's less risk of like translation issues when you have one group that is putting together the data and another group that's developing and synthesizing the decks based upon the data. We're presenting a problem that you have a marketing operations team that's fairly overloaded, that doesn't have necessarily the bandwidth to develop the decks so that they can have the seat at the table, or really develop that C-level acumen. We're doing a lot of this on our spare time, and I think a lot of us also want to have lives.
Yes.
And I think it begs the question too about how much technology investment marketing ops is making in itself. I think this is a question worth answering, because if you think about our stacks, we are developing our stacks to enable marketers. Most of the time we're enabling the marketing teams, we're enabling the campaigns to be excellent, be technologically efficient. We're enabling the campaigns to deliver the data, the insights that enable the marketers to be successful. And also take leads through the sales process, through the SDRs, through the sales group efficiently, so that we get these feedback loops on, hey, are our marketing campaigns working? Are we delivering the right quality of MQLs? Are they converting? What types of interest is converting? A lot of these are, and necessarily so, they're marketing revenue team focused. However, marketing ops teams, we should look at like creating efficiencies for ourselves. And I don't know if we've done an adequate job of that. So, we're being asked to do more with less. We're being asked to essentially enable the organization. Should we also ask the question, should we technology enable ourselves? Because a lot of these questions we're being asked to deliver to the C-suite, those are hard questions. And right now, most of us are using pretty complex ETL that maybe we or somebody else is building for us. We're using a lot of Excel spreadsheets. I know I'm an Excel wizard. I've done my share. And it's time consuming. And then on top of that, we're developing these PowerPoint decks that may, because of the level of detail that's in them, land into the appendix section. So I think it's worth asking, should marketing ops, especially in this new phase, look at enabling ourselves? Because a lot of things that are being asked of us do require that we have something behind us that's helping us deliver the value that we've been asked to deliver.